I made a typeface out of this ramen noodle pack right here, the Shin Ramen. This is how I did it. This is the full process. My name's Josie and I'm a graphic designer. Guys, I'm struggling to talk today. I'm struggling to make an intro. I used two softwares to do this. So I used Glyphs and Illustrator. These are both vector-based softwares, which means that they're very compatible. So I'll explain a bit more about what that means afterwards. But just to start, first of all, I cooked the ramen and I photographed it. There is 12 minutes of raw footage of me cooking, eating, and photographing these noodles. And you may catch it at the end, but my camera fell into the noodle bowl at the end, okay? So that's how that day went for me, okay? That's basically summing up how that experience was.
2 steps ahead. I am always 2 steps ahead. This has been the greatest social experiment of my entire life. Thirsty for a distraction from time unspent, spoiling their minds, yet stimulating them at the same time. It's brilliant, and it's dangerous. I feel as if I'm monitoring ants on an ant farm. All these little consumers, all of these lost and bored people.
So I photographed the noodles, trying to get as many angles as I could, as many iterations as I could of this bowl of noodles, and imported that into Illustrator. When I was in Illustrator, I just started tracing the lines with the brush tool and just getting all of these shapes of the noodles that were in the bowl and trying to get as many different versions as possible that I could use, and keeping, of course, the line width the same so it was all very uniform. And then I had my database of these noodle shapes. You will notice that through basically the entire thing, it's this ugly ass pink color. That's because it stood out on the noodles and then I just didn't feel like changing it afterwards. So yeah, sorry that it actually looks so ugly. Once I had the noodle shapes finally, it was time to build the letter form. I used a square grid to act as a guide for when I was creating the letters for the height and the width. Of course, in type design, some of them are meant to go outside, so O's are meant to go a little bit outside, same with S's. W's are a little bit wider, and this is all based on optics, so type design is a lot of just optically how letters fit together, and sometimes they're not exactly the same, so you just need to play around with that a bit. But I began building these letter shapes and just playing around with how the forms fit together. So at first I wanted them to be all very diverse and unique and different, but then I realized that I was beginning to repeat shapes that were really useful, like the stem of the H's became the I, and these other shapes, which does make it feel a bit more like a family, like a type family. So they kind of go together and it feels like it's a bit more uniform and it's a better fit. And especially when you're typing words, you'll find that these letters have a flow to them. So you want them to have kind of the same direction. They have this sort of weird slanted italicism, which you'll see at the end. But yeah, so I started making these letter shapes, just playing around with that and building them out a little bit. So now all of these type shapes exist, but this is not a usable typeface. You want to be able to type it out and make words and import it to other softwares. So this is done using a type design software. I'm using Glyphs Mini because there was the free trial, and Glyphs is kind of an industry standard type design software. So the way that this works is Illustrator and Glyphs are both vector-based softwares, and what a vector is in Photoshop, it'll be pixel-based. So it'll be 1,000 pixels by 1,000 pixels, and if you blow it up really big, then it becomes pixelated, it becomes blurry, and the images aren't as clear. And when you're using photographs, you kind of have to do that. The way that vectors work is they plot the shapes on a graph, a mathematical graph that you can't see in the software, which means that when they're blown up really, really big, the shape is retained because it's plotted on a graph. So you can make a logo or a letter as big as you want it. It can be the size of a billboard and it's still going to be crisp and clear. And that's the reason why we use vectors, and that's the reason why I really like Illustrator versus Photoshop when I do projects, because you can make it any size that you want. Glyphs is also vector-based, so you can scale up these fonts as large as you want to, and they're still very usable. Which means that you can literally press copy and press paste the shapes that you make from Illustrator into Glyphs, which is my life hack. This is what I always do because I'm not really good with using Glyphs or building out letters. I'm way more comfortable in Illustrator, so I just copy and paste. However, one thing that I was making really sure of is when I had these letter forms, they were done using strokes, so I outlined them, expanded them so that they would be their own shapes individually instead of a stroke width. It's really important to simplify those down and reduce the anchor points, because in Glyphs, it doesn't respond well to having a ton of anchor points, and the software, it just does not like it, okay? Like, it's just not very good. So you want it to be as simple as possible and as smooth as possible, so I was just using the Simplify and Smooth tool to make the shapes a lot easier to work with. Once I imported that into Glyphs, there were still some things that needed to be cleaned up, so I was just cleaning up those graph points, making sure that they're all curved and there's no weird, like, straight bits, and just making sure that the letters are quite smooth, and of course doing the sizing of them properly, and trying to keep them as uniform as possible in the stroke width. This was time consuming, guys. Okay, this took me a long time to create all the letter forms and put them into Glyphs and make it usable. But eventually I had it. I have my display typeface, which is all of my uppercase letters, and it was time to kern. I was just typing out different sentences and playing with the spacing a bit. And then I was just kind of like, it looks kind of fine if they're all the same. Like, I just made the kerning the same for all of them, which is bad, but like, whatever. So you need to manually adjust the kerning sometimes, like in some of the words when you're actually using it, because it's kind of weird. But yeah. It was fun, I just typed it all out, and then now I have my beautiful kimchi display. I just exported the file, and it is a fully, like, usable, functioning font file. It's crazy. These literal ramen noodles are now a typeface. You guys can just do anything. And now kimchi display is out there in the world, and I'm gonna go and make my type specimen now, which I will show you the final result with. So thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy my little type specimen.